Hi, my name is Bruce R. Savage. Welcome to Up On 2. This show is about my travels across the United States and down through Central America on my sports motorcycle.
All right, so what's going on, my brother?
Oh, it's going well. It's going well.
Okay. The last time we spoke was just before you were about to take off to head to Panama, right? So tell me about that first day there.
Well, actually, I want to start a little bit before the first day.
Okay.
Just telling people that I was going on that journey was I got quite a few different kinds of reactions. Some were for it, but surprisingly to me, the majority of my friends were against it. Even my family, they were saying, no, don't go, or find someone to go with you. And I did try to find people to go with me, but there's not very many people that are willing to ride 5,000 plus miles on a motorcycle through a foreign country. So that was a challenge. And my wife was vehemently against it. She's gone through me having a motorcycle accident in the past in '09, which was major, and I could have lost my life in that motorcycle accident, but I was led by God. I was praying last summer, and it came to me. God said that He wanted me to go to Panama, and He didn't say go to Panama on a motorcycle, but He did tell me to go to Panama. So, given that, I started planning for it. I bought the proper gear. I actually purchased a used 2007 Yamaha R1, which is a race bike. And I bought that purposely for this journey. I bought helmets, I bought video equipment because my intent was to capture it with media. I have a GoPro, I used my tablet, and I did a whole lot of preparation for this trip. Eventually, my mom came around to the idea that I was going. And she said to me that she prayed about it with some of the mothers in the church. And one of the mothers in the church said, Addie, which is my mom's name, Addie, your son is going to meet a man on this journey. She said, God brought it to me as clear as day that your son is going to meet a man on this journey. And she brought that back to me, and I said, wow. It felt real. It felt like that I would meet a man. Well, I met several men, but the specific man, I did meet a specific man, and I think I'll tell you about that a little bit later. But leaving out, to be honest, I was very, very afraid. I was scared because of all of the people who were telling me, well, when you go through Mexico, you better watch out for that cartel. They're kidnapping people, and Americans, they're high commodity because they know you have money. And I said, well, I feel like God put me on this earth that I can go pretty much anywhere on this earth and be safe because He's going to protect me. And not to be prejudiced or racist, but they kidnapping white men that have money who are, connected to the government or have large sums of money. I'm a black man on a motorcycle. How much money can I have? Especially on a motorcycle. Well, and it was an '07 motorcycle. It wasn't a brand new Harley or anything like that. It's a nice, very nice bike. But nevertheless, I didn't feel that kind of fear. But because of that, it was set in the back of my mind, and I believe that was the enemy talking to me. No, you don't need to go, because he didn't want me to fulfill and be obedient to what God had told me. So I continued still, even fearful, to go on the journey. And then I started looking at the weather, and I found out that it was rainy season. And my dad, who's connected to God, he said, I'm going to talk to God. And I have been talking to God, and He told me that you shouldn't go, son, because it's going to be dangerous. It's rainy season. They're having floods in the bottom part of the United States. You might not even make it to Central America. And I have a lot of faith in my dad. But I said, Dad, but I have to go, Dad. And he said, well, what are you going to do when it rains? I said, well, I'm going to put on rain gear. I've ridden across country before, and I've ridden in the rain before. So I'll just put on rain gear. And lo and behold, the Sunday that I left, as I was pulling out the garage, it started raining. as sure as rain, it was raining. And it started out as a drizzle, and that put a little bit more fear in my heart. But I said, no, you've done this before, so I continued riding. I started riding in 1988. I bought a 1987 Kawasaki. It was a EX500, a really basic bike. And I remember that bike, I was really enamored with one of my neighbors who had a motorcycle. And when I got that bike, that was a really, really nice bike. It was the first bike. And the guy who sold it to me, he was a unique guy, a white guy. What he would do, he would buy bikes that were in accidents, refurbished bikes, and he would put them back together. And when he sold me that bike, he towed it to my house because I didn't know how to ride at that point. And he said to me, he said, do you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ? And I said, yeah, I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ all my life. He said, are you saved? I said, I just told you I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. He said, but are you saved? I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, make the Lord Jesus Christ, make your life about the Lord Jesus Christ. And at the time, I was 28. I wasn't thinking about Christ like that. I just bought me a motorcycle. I just wanted to ride. I wanted to be wild. I wanted to do those kind of things. So, but that was my first bike. But I never forgot what he said to me. And I rode that motorcycle to North Carolina, Rocky Mount, North Carolina, to see my grandmother who was alive at the time. And that was my first long trip on a motorcycle. And that trip made me fall in love with riding motorcycles. It taught me a lot. And then I bought several bikes since that time. That was my first bike. Then I had a GSXR 1100. I had what else did I have? I had a TL 1000. I had a R1 2004, and I presently still have a Ducati, a 2011 Ducati 848 Ducati. But the Ducati isn't a comfortable bike to ride long distance. Great race bike, great track bike, but not a kind of bike that you want to ride for long distance because it takes too much concentration. When you ride a Ducati, you really want to be in it and you want it to perform. And that's what it'll do. Whereas the R1 will perform, but you don't have to ride it like performance all the time. You can lay back and relax a little bit on the R1. On a Ducati, you try to lay back and relax and you lose focus and you might get in an accident. So I bought a 2007 Yamaha R1 from a guy in Jersey. And I met him through a guy I used to work with who's a bike enthusiast. He drag races bikes. So he got on Facebook and found this bike for me. And I called the guy and I went to Jersey and found the bike and I wanted to ride the bike. I rode my Ducati there and I wanted to ride the bike and he said, no, you ride bikes so you know how easy it is to go down. If you go down, I got a crashed up bike and I don't have any money. So I looked at the bike, he started it. I could tell, R1's a good bike and I could tell this guy, he was racing karts and he had everything on this bike. This bike is beautiful. He took care of it really well. I asked him questions. He could tell me about the cylinders. He could tell me about the chain maintenance. He could tell me what kind of oil to put in it. He really knew his stuff. So I gave him a deposit for the bike and then I came back the week after and picked up the bike and rode it home. Really nice bike. It needed a new battery, so I put a new battery in it. I asked him about an oil change. He said he had changed it last season. He suggested, since I was going on such a long journey, to change the oil. And he specifically said, get Yamaha, I forget the name of the Yamalube oil with ester. And this oil was supposed to be premium oil. When it heats up, it doesn't gel or anything like that. So I did. I changed the oil. I did that for it. He suggested that I get tires, Michelin Road 4 tires. These tires, they have the hard compound down the center because you're going long distances just straight up. But on the sides, it had the soft compound so that when you do the leaning over and you do the twisties, like I'm doing here, like I do the twist, like I'm going through a twisty here. I have good speed. I'm doing about 70 to 90 miles per hour. but as you can see, I'm really leaning. And also you can see here, you can see the rain, you can see the water just blowing off my gloves and blowing off the camera. You can see, all the water around. These Michelin Road 4 tires, they were the best. It was like almost driving in dry ground. So I'm really, really prepped for this journey, and those tires were one of the best investments I made. The other thing I purchased was a Bell helmet, a modular helmet. The helmet, it clicks up and clicks down so that you can be full face with the protection around your face and the shield down, but also it had fog protection in the shield. So, the temperature, the cold temperature and the rain and the wet usually creates fog in your helmet. So then you can't see because it fogs up. But it had it had a fog protection on the shield, which was a really excellent feature, especially for the first day when I'm going out. That was great. That was really great. But driving on a motorcycle, some of the things that people don't realize is when you go down in valleys, it gets cold. When you come up in mountains, it gets warmer. So hot air rises and falls depending on the altitude that you're on. And coming through Pennsylvania, going to Harrisburg, there are some rises and falls. And I was actually cold, even though I had on my gear, and even though I had on the rain gear on top of that, I was cold. And that was one of the reasons that I stopped at the Harrisburg service stop. When I got to Harrisburg, it was raining full force. It was raining hard. And I had my rain gear on, and my gloves, these gloves, were soaking wet to the point where the leather started shrinking a little bit around my hands, and just holding that throttle for so long, it makes your hand starts gripping, and the cold wet, your hand starts cramping a little bit. And that was discouraging, but I said, no, you have to at least drive a tank of gas out of this bike before you stop. So by the time I got about a little farther than 90 miles, I hadn't ridden a full tank of gas out, but when you're 90 miles out, I only had maybe another 40 miles before I run out of gas. So I stopped right outside of Harrisburg, and I went in, and there was a Starbucks, and got me one of those expensive cups of coffee. I think it was $6.60 for a cup of coffee. That's ridiculous. I could buy a whole pot of coffee for $6, but nevertheless, you had a rest stop at a service stop, and I had a pastry that I love these pastries that I get from Glenside. And I had my pastry. I sat down, took off my gloves, my helmet, sat down, got some heat, and I had parked my bike underneath a canopy where the service stop was, and relaxed for about a good 15 minutes. And then I looked at the map. They had a map. They had a map in a service stop, and it showed where the storm was. So I went over there. I had my GoPro. I filmed the screen that they had, and it comes up intermittently, so I didn't get the full thing of where the storm was coming. But then I looked on my phone. Also, I used my phone for my GPS. So I looked at where the storm was, and I said, to avoid this rain, if I go further west, I'll avoid the rain, and I'll be able to travel faster. So that's the choice I made. It cost me more in miles, but it cost me less in weather. So that's the kind of decisions that you have to make when you're traveling like that. So that's what I did. I took that route, but I still had to ride through the mountains and get to West Virginia. And when I was making that climb up into West Virginia, you go through tunnels where they bored through the mountain. And when I got on the other side of the tunnel, it was fog. Not fog in my shield, but fog because I guess we were up in the clouds at that point. So I couldn't go as fast because in fear of running into the back of someone. But on the other hand, I couldn't go too slow because I didn't want anybody to run in the back of me. I'm a small vehicle. I only have that little light in the back that reflecting, who I am, or that it's a vehicle there, and a car driving fast in the fog might not see me. Now, normally on a motorcycle, you never worry about what's behind you because you're going faster than what's behind you, more times than not. But in a case like that, I couldn't go but so fast because I didn't want to crash into what was in front of me that I couldn't see. And on the other hand, I didn't want anything to crash into the back of me who couldn't see me. So that was a dangerous situation. It was beautiful though, because when you came up above the clouds, you could kind of almost like grab the clouds like cotton because the clouds were hitting like maybe here, and then you would go down and then you couldn't see. You know, you could see, but you couldn't see but more than maybe 25 feet ahead of you. And that was an interesting part of the ride, but I really enjoyed that also. And then the next time I stopped for gas, it slowed down to a drizzle. So I had met my goal by riding out of the weather. And then I was riding in a portion of the interstate where it finally got dry, and the ground was still a little wet, but it was drying up pretty quick. And someone who was driving a Mitsubishi, I don't know what year, but you could tell it was a factory sports car. He didn't soup it up or anything. I don't think he did any extras to it, but I know from knowing motor vehicles that car ran pretty well. So he came up behind me, and another thing that you do when you ride a motorcycle is you want to draft. You want to get behind a vehicle that's larger than you so that you don't have to contend with the wind. And the way I learned about that actually is, remember I told you about that EX500 that I rode to North Carolina? Well, when I was coming back from Virginia, I was coming through Virginia on my first ride from North Carolina. I was in the hammer lane, which is the far left lane, which is the passing lane. And I came through a section where the road was turning to the right, and I was doing average about 90, maybe 100 miles per hour on the EX. But when you get tired, you want to sit up. But your riding position on a sports bike should be knees to elbows. So your knees to elbows like this. You want to be knees to elbows. That way, you're behind the shield, the wind is going over your shield, over your helmet, over your shoulders, and you're aerodynamic with the bike. That's why they have all that plastic on the sides, so that you can be aerodynamic and cut through the wind. Well, I was tired by the time I got to Virginia coming back home, so instead of being knees to elbows, I was more like this. I was in an upright position. Well, when you ride like that, at that speed, 100 miles per hour, the wind is hitting you in your chest. And I was going through a turn. So the wind is hitting me in my chest, and I'm trying to turn, but the wind is hitting me in my chest, and it's sailing me further and further to the right. So I went from the fast lane to the passing lane, to the next lane, to the next lane, to the shoulder, almost getting ready to hit the guardrail, and I ducked because I thought I was going to hit the guardrail, but when I ducked, it let the air pass over, and I was aerodynamic again, and then I was able to control my bike back into the lane. So you have to worry about being aerodynamic. That's one of the features of knowing how to ride, is knowing how to deal with the wind. So again, I was talking about this Mitsubishi. He was averaging 90 to about 120 in places. So he was the perfect person for me to draft with. All I had to do was stay on his bumper. I don't have to worry about the wind. He's cutting the wind for me. He's breaking the wind. He's breaking that barrier. And all I have to do is stay low. And I could even sit up because he's breaking the wind for me. So I stayed behind him. And he was doing 120. And when he recognized that I was staying with him for about 20 miles now, he felt like he wanted to leave me. So he presses down, and now he's doing 130. No problem. I just turned my throttle a little bit more. So now he really thinks he's going to leave me. So I don't know if he floored it or whatever, but now he's doing 140. I downshift a gear. I'm in 6. I downshift a gear and just hit my throttle real hard, and I'm back on his tail, and then I upshift back to 6 gear. So now he's going through a curve, but we're carrying that kind of speed, and I don't want to get off of that speed. So when we go through the curve, I'm on a bike. I just lean it over, and go through that curve nice and smooth. And I keep my acceleration. But in a car, you can't really keep that kind of acceleration unless you have the right aerodynamics and the right tires. But those Road 4s were like, I call them stickies. Well, Pirellis you call stickies, but they stick to the road. The side of it, because of that soft compound, sticks to the road. So I could lean all the way over. I could lean, almost put my knee down and go through that curve. And I went through that curve, and then the traffic was a little, we started encountering traffic, and I'm a bike, I'm small. I cut through the traffic, and I ended up leaving him, and I was sad because he was breaking my air for me. So I slowed down to about 90, 95. Then he finally caught back up, and he broke again, and I got right back on his bumper again. And he took me, we must have done that for at least a good 80 miles. And that was motivation for me to continue on my journey, because now I'm making really, really good time, because from Philadelphia to Harrisburg, I was dealing with the rain. And even in the rain, I was averaging from 80 to 100 miles per hour in places. But now that it's dry, and I have what I call a rabbit. I call someone who's going fast, I call them my rabbit. That way I can just stay on them. And when I want to, I can break and leave them, but it's always better for me to stay on their tail so that they can break the air for me. So I had a rabbit, and he took me all the way to West Virginia. West Virginia, when I got to West Virginia and ran out of gas, well, didn't run out of gas, my gas was low. I ran my gas until the yellow light comes on. When the yellow light comes on, it says you have 30 miles left in your gas tank. That varies depending on, if you're running really fast, that's more like 20 miles left in your gas tank. If you're running at the speed limit, you could stretch it to maybe 35 miles in your gas tank. And my Bluetooth fits right in my ears, both ears, and it's like earplugs. So you can only hear what's coming out of the Bluetooth. You can hear extraneous airflow, but for the most part, you're just hearing what's coming out of the Bluetooth. Also, my GPS was connected to the Bluetooth, so when I had to make a left or a right turn or whichever way I needed to go, it was giving me directions. Also, my phone was on my yoke, so therefore, I could also look at the phone and it would say the next, I don't know, mile and a quarter, make a right turn, make a left turn, or whatever. So I was listening to the music that my daughter had recorded for me through my phone. Also, I listened to iHeartRadio as long as I could get a signal, but when I couldn't get a signal, I listened to Daddy's playlist, and thank you, Dasha, because it got me through several and numerous miles. When my daughter Dasha was going to college, we planned a road trip. I bought a used caravan, and I packed all of her belongings in the caravan, and I put my motorcycle in the caravan and actually packed her stuff around the motorcycle. And we drove cross country to Stanford. And she had just gotten her driver's license, or passed the test for her driver's license 3 days before we left for Stanford. So she really learned how to drive a car on her way to Stanford. So once we got to Stanford, I took my motorcycle out and my gear, and I left the minivan with her and rode back across country home. That was my first really long distance trip. And I rode back from California back to Philadelphia. Well, when I was riding through Vegas, when I left Las Vegas and I looked at my gas stops, and there were 3 gas stations before I would run out of gas. So the first gas station was open, and I was going to stop, and I said, nah, I'm flowing too good. I don't want to stop right now. But mind you, I'm going through the desert of Nevada. So the next gas station, I said, well, I'll stop here. And when I looked, the gas station was closed. I said, oh no. So I looked at the gas that I had, and I said, okay, I got the next one. I can hit the next one up. So I checked my GPS and I checked my phone signal. I had no cell phone signal because I'm out in the middle of the desert, and evidently they didn't have a tower close enough. So I really don't know how far the next gas station is. And if I run out of gas, I can't even call anyone because I don't have a cell signal. So now I'm very nervous. But what I learned and what I know is if you stay aerodynamic, stay low behind your windshield, and if you slow down to 55, 60 miles per hour, you preserve gas. You can get a lot farther. Now, so instead of that 110, which is what I was averaging coming back from California to Philadelphia, I slowed it down to 55 because I didn't want to have to be walking or trying to wave somebody down. Mind you, I'm the only one on the highway. I don't see no cars around me. I haven't passed a car in a long time now because I'm not traveling really fast because I don't want to run out of gas. So I haven't passed anybody. Nobody's behind me. So I'm going slow, going slow, going slow, going slow. And then finally, I get to a gas station. Now, the R1 uses premium gasoline. But that gas station only had 86 octane gasoline, which is way below 92. But you know what went in that gas tank? 86. I put some 86 gasoline in that tank that day. And fortunately, I met another guy who was riding, and we rode together and ended up in Utah together. So, but we had each other's back if one of us ran out of gas or whatever. But that's a very important lesson and knowledge to have is if you're running out of gas, the best thing to do is to slow down to around 55, 60 miles per hour to preserve your gas and try to stay as aerodynamic as you can. That way you can stretch your mileage. So I was talking about going from Vegas, from Nevada to Utah, and I picked up a guy who was riding. He had been riding all over the country from Canada, and he was from Canada. And he and I started riding together. And what I taught him, which I learned from driving cars, is you always find yourself a rabbit. And I talked about a rabbit a little bit earlier, but a rabbit is someone that's doing the speed that you want to do, but you always let them be in front of you. And for two reasons, because they're going to cut the wind, which is going to save you gas. And if the police come out, you can just take your foot off the gas and let the police catch them to get the ticket instead of you getting the ticket. So I always try to find a rabbit, and I always try to find local tags that are in the, like if I'm driving in Iowa, I want to follow somebody who has Iowa tags because they know where the police are because they're familiar, they're locals. So that's one of the lessons I learned from driving cross country when I took my daughter to school. And one thing I can say, both my daughters were very supportive of me taking this journey to Panama, which was a big boost, And my oldest daughter is pregnant, getting ready to have my first grandchild. And she said, Daddy, just be safe because I want Naya, my grandchild's going to be named Naya. I want Naya to be able to meet her grandfather and spend some time with you. So that was a big boost. That really was encouraging that she felt confident that I would come back safely.
You've heard me say, stay up on two. It's a term we motorcyclists use, meaning don't crash, be safe, watch your stopping distance, don't bang out, stay up on two.